Ben, can you do something to make my clicker work? There we go. Okay. I live east of Shirley. That picture was taken about 13 blocks north of my place. That's a pretty good picture. Only broken branches here, a few trees. In case anybody cares. I don't know. You have a sadistic mind, Fred. In chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes, the wisest man who ever lived writes, "Again I have observed all the acts of oppression being done under the sun. Look at the tears of those who are oppressed. They have no one to comfort them. Power is with those who oppress them. They have no one to comfort them. So I admired the dead, who have already died, more than the living, who are still alive. But better than either of them is the one who has not yet existed, who has not seen the evil activity that is under the sun. I saw all that labor and the skillful work due to a man's jealousy of his friend. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind." Now I find this ironic because as king, he has the ability to undo injustice. But he says he has seen it with his own eyes. Now, we in the Pentecostal world believe that it's our moral obligation when we see injustice to try to be the best that we can be to counteract the injustice that we see. You know, we talk about us as being watchmen on the tower, pointing out the enemy. But we are also to be vessels of correction where we have the ability. Yet the king here doesn't sound like that, does he? He doesn't sound like that at all. Again, I saw futility under the sun. There is a person without a companion, without even a son or brother. And though there's no end to all his struggles, his eyes are still not content with riches. So who am I struggling for, he asks, and depriving myself from good? This too is futile and a miserable task. Then Solomon gives us two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Also, if two lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm? And if someone overpowers one person, two can resist him. And a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. At one time, verse 10 was sort of one of my mottos in life. It was one of those things that I clung to, pity the man who falls that has no one to lift him up. Verse 5, Solomon tells us, guard your steps. When you go to the house of God, better to draw near in obedience than to offer sacrifice as fools do, for they ignorantly do wrong. Do not be hasty to speak. Do not be impulsive to make speech before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. For dreams result from much work, a fool's voice from many words. When you make a vow to God, don't delay fulfilling it, because he does not delight in fools. Fulfill what you have vowed. Better that you do not vow than that you vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth bring guilt on you. Do not say in the presence of a messenger, that was a mistake. Why should God be angry with your words and destroy the works of your hands? For many dreams bring futility, and so do many words. Therefore, fear God. I find it interesting that Solomon's call is to guard your hearts, because that alone is a very daunting task. What does it mean to guard your heart? Guard it from what? Only evil? Any kind of influence that's not good. There are a lot of things that you can guard your heart from. If we were to just do a sermon on just that, it'd probably take a year. The one who loves money is never satisfied with money, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with income. This too is futile. This is one of the things that you should guard your heart against. Probably the first thing mentioned. When good things increase, the one who consumes them multiply. What then is the profit to the owner except the gaze at them with his eyes? The sleep of the worker is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of rich permits him no sleep. There is a stricken tragedy I have seen under the sun. Wealth kept by the owner to his harm. Now this is an interesting concept. Wealth kept to one's harm. That wealth is lost in a bad adventure, so when he fathered a son, he was empty-handed. He came from his mother's womb, so he will go again, naked as he came. He will take nothing from his effort that he will carry in his hands. Now, as I read through these passages of what Solomon is saying, I gather that he is watching this in somebody he knows. Whether he knew them when he was young, or whether he knows them now, or somewhere in between his young and his aged wisdom. But he writes this as he is a witness to this as a first-hand experience. I've seen the wealth squandered. I've seen wealth harm the person who has it. This is an eyewitness account. I find this interesting that he is telling us all of these things. This too is sickening tragedy. Exactly as he comes, he will go. What does the one gain who struggles for the win? What is more, he eats in the darkness all his days, with much sorrow, sickness, and anger. Here's what I've seen to be good. It is appropriate to eat and drink and experience good in all the labor one does under the sun during the few days of his life. God has given him. Because of that is his reward. God has also given riches and wealth to every man, and has allowed him to enjoy them, to take his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is a gift of God. He does not often consider the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart. Now this is interesting because there's a lot of things said here. Because again, Ecclesiastes, you see, it feels like 2/3 of it are, this is futile, this is futile, this is futile. And then he says, well, I have seen that this is good. And he says, it is good to enjoy the fruits of your labor. It is good to be occupied. It is good to enjoy. It is good not to be alone. It is good to enjoy food and wine, but not too much food or wine, because that is futile, as we have read last week. And he is very clear to recognize what is a gift of God. I also find it interesting. It is good for you to enjoy what you do. So if you got a job that you enjoy, that is a good thing. Here is a treasure I have observed under the sun, and it weighs heavily on humanity. God gives a man riches, wealth, and honor so that he lacks nothing of all he desires for himself, but God does not allow him to enjoy them. Instead, a stranger will enjoy them. This is futile and sickening tragedy. Now, as I read verses 1 and 2, again, as it comes out as a witness, he's witnessing this. Now, he's witnessing the wealth of somebody going to a stranger. What kind of scenarios do you and see in our own life that we can say, we recognize that? Now, we all probably can come up with a few examples if we thought hard enough. Verse 3, this is interesting. A man may father 100 children and live many years. No matter how long he lives, if he is not satisfied by the good things and does not even have a proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For he comes in futility, and he goes into darkness, and his name is shrouded in darkness. Though a stillborn does not see the sun and is not conscious, it has more rest than he. And if he lives 1,000 years twice, but does not experience happiness, don't both go to the same place? Again, the wisdom of Solomon is interesting, how he compares that with a life that wasn't with a life that was poorly lived. And I'm using that term poorly lived because it's not a question of wealth. It's not a question of offspring, because in this example, both are present. Neither determine quality of life in this passage. And sometimes Solomon gives us things that sound confusing. Next slide, please. What advantage does a wise man have over a fool? What advantage is there for a poor person who knows how to conduct himself before others? Better what the eyes have seen than a wandering desire. This too is futile in the pursuit of the wind. Now, as I read these two verses together, it sounds much like one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's stuff. It sounds like that. And that it is better for a poor person who knows how to conduct himself. Do we know how to conduct ourselves? And again, he talks about wandering desires. Does your mind wander in places that allow you to covet what you should not covet? Because he compares this to the pursuit of the wind. Whatever exists has given its name long ago, and it is known what man is. But he is not able to contend with the one stronger than he. For when there are many words, they increase futility. What is the advantage for man? For who knows what is good for the man in life? In a few days of his futile life, and what he spends like a shadow. Who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? Now, I don't know about you, but this kind of sounds a little bleak. You know, we can talk about the science of your body decaying. We can talk about the legal aspects to what happens to one's estate. But Solomon is kind of clear. This sounds bleak. Who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? Now we get to things that we can concentrate on. A good name is better than fine perfume. And when I say a good name, I think the author is trying to say a good reputation, to be known as a man of your word or a person of your word is better than fine perfume. The day of one's death, then the day of one's death, a good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of one's death than the day of one's birth. So it talks about dying with a good reputation is better than your birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, since that is the end of all mankind. The living should take it to heart. Grief is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of fools is in a house of pleasure. Now we say, yeah, that makes sense. Now that doesn't mean that we don't mourn when we lose a loved one. We should. But when we fear that the person who's passed away does not have a heaven-bound life, it makes us think. It should make us ponder. And it should, in some cases, it's a privilege to us when we know that they're heaven-bound to have been part of their journey to get there. But when they're not heaven-bound, it should sadden us. And to some extent, that sadness should cause us to be sensitive, to seek and save that is lost. As Jesus said, the purpose of his coming was. Verse 5, chapter 7. It is better to listen to rebuke from a wise person than to listen to the songs of fools, for they like the crackling of burning thorns under the pot. So is the laughter of a fool. This too is futile. The end of the matter is better than its beginning. A patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. Don't let your spirit rush to be angry, for anger abides in the heart of fools. Now that alone sounds like a sermon to guard your heart from. Because you and I are quite capable of getting angry easily, are we not? This is something that we are not to rush into. Don't say, why were the former days better than these? Since it is not wise of you to ask. Now, I don't know about you, but you can't go to a cafe in rural North Dakota where somebody talks about the good old days. Right? When I can remember when. And if we were to ask you a question, I remember when, I bet you have all kinds of examples. Matter of fact, let's ask the question, what's the lowest price of gas you remember in your lifetime? Fred. Okay. Sanford, what's the cheapest fuel you remember at the gas station? That's free. You can't get any better than free.
Yeah, that's free.
Okay. Dave, what's the lowest gas you remember? Okay. So we can't have a survey like this without asking our youngest driver in our midst. Elias, what's the cheapest gas you can remember in your lifetime? It was cheaper like 4 days ago than it is yesterday. Well, Pastor, who's a tish younger than you guys, cheapest gas in my lifetime is 99 cents a gallon. Yep. You remember 97 cents. Well, that must be the difference from where we lived. Because that was... Oh, for a whole tank of fuel. Okay. It is fun to sometimes reminisce. And you know, you can when you reminisce, sometimes you reminisce about the changes that have take place. You know, when I was a kid, the remote for the TV was my dad saying, change it to channel 6. I was the remote. And we only had 3 channels, and they were all black and white. Now we have remotes that are no bigger than this. That, yeah. But I love verse 11. Wisdom is as good as an inheritance and an advantage to those that see the sun. Because wisdom is protection as money is protection. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves life of its owner. Consider the work of God. Who can straighten out what he has made crooked? I think that's kind of a powerful verse. In my feudal life, I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in spite of his righteousness. There's a wicked man who lives long in spite of his evil. Don't be excessively righteous, and don't be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Don't be excessively wicked, and don't be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp the one and not let the other slip from your hand. For the one who fears God will end up with both of them. Now, this is an interesting line. As we read through this paragraph, there you get the feeling that he's talking about having a life of balance. That to live a life like a monk might be too much of one way. And he's like, don't be a complete fool. But it sounds like he's talking about a life of balance here. Don't be too righteous. Don't be too monkish. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not so sure where I sit on this. Because we as Pentecostals believe that we should pursue righteousness. So this has to take some time to digest. I have to mill this over to see what that means and how that works out. And what does it mean not to be too righteous in this? And he talks about, again, whether you're one way or the other, you're both going to die. So don't go overboard one way or the other. Wisdom makes the wise man stronger than 10 rulers of a city. There is certainly righteousness, no righteous man on earth, who does good and never sins. Don't pay attention to everything people say, or you may hear what your servant cursing you. For you know many times you yourselves have cursed. Now again, when you hear stuff like that, you just have to take a step back and digest it. You have to just say, what does this mean and how does this work its way out for me? Now, we understand that wisdom is a good thing, and we understand that wisdom promotes a lot of positives. As we get to this in our own life, it is good for us to have balance in our life. And as we conclude this message, it is good to enjoy your work. It is good not to be alone. It is good to have balance in your life and not to be too far extreme one way or the other. Now, the wisdom of Solomon at this stage is something that we kind of have to work through. And we want to gain wisdom because it's valuable for us. And we know that the Bible is an inspired word of God, and Ecclesiastes is in the Bible, and so it is good for us to know the content of the Bible. And so as we prepare for this week, let us make sure our life has balance. Let's make sure that there's a little bit of everything going on in our life. And let us concentrate on the good stuff as well as the not so good stuff. Do we have a closing hymn? All right. I'll invite you guys to come.